the only unique thing you have in this world is your voice. As a person, as a scientist or an organization wanting to make impact, how do you distinguish your voice from all the other voices out there? In a world where we are inundated with information and voices, from the internet to social media to the news to television to podcasts, how do you know your voice is being heard? Within 10 minutes of talking, I felt so energized. I went for an hour and a half, and it went by so quickly. And so those are the things that confirm for me, like, this is what you need to be doing, because even when you're physically tired, mentally tired, there is some type of energy beyond you.
Welcome to the Science with Impact podcast. I'm so glad that you're here with us today. We're going to have a wonderful discussion about career, writing, and purpose. And to guide that conversation and to lead it, we have Dr. Vernetta, who I am just so excited to introduce you to. Vernetta, I feel like we do a better job of introducing ourselves. Would you be willing to introduce yourself for our listeners?
Of course. And thank you so much, Vanessa, for having me on your podcast. It's an honor to be here. I am a business owner, a wife, a mother, consultant, auntie, but professionally I have a PhD in English, and I work with universities to do academic skill development. I also work with government agencies and companies to do, in the world of AI, human skills training around communication, critical thinking. And so I service universities and government agencies and helping people just to upskill, to develop their skill sets, to evolve, to meet their educational and professional goals. Being a PhD holder, the expectation was for me to go into higher education, and I didn't feel like that was a good fit for me. What do I do with a PhD in English other than be an English professor? I really didn't know what I was going to do, but I came across some of the needs early on. That's when I took a risk and didn't listen to my mentors and people who were saying, but this is what you're groomed to do. You're supposed to be in higher education. You're supposed to pursue a tenure track faculty line. After doing that for a little while, it just didn't feel right until I was confident enough to say, this is the path for me. I just stopped telling people what I wanted to do and stopped asking for permission or trying to get guidance. That was in 2008. I started a company in 2011, and my thought was I can always go back into higher education and teach if this doesn't pan out, but I have to pursue what's in my heart. And so I'm thankful and grateful that X number of years later, the business has grown and I'm able to use my skill set to help others who don't have the training in writing, but writing is so critical for them to be successful, or even communication. I started with the writing, but I quickly learned that the need is not just writing, the need is communication, the need is presenting, the need is developing voice, the need is being confident, the need is overcoming a lot of things that hinder people to be successful.
Why should our listeners, who are researchers trying to broaden their societal impacts or scientists who want to find more purpose in what they're doing, listen to our conversation?
I think they should listen to this conversation because the only unique thing you have in this world is your voice. As a person, as a scientist or an organization wanting to make impact, how do you distinguish your voice from all the other voices out there? In a world where we are inundated with information and voices, from the internet to social media to the news to television to podcasts to YouTube videos, how do you know your voice is being heard? It's important to be clear about, number one, your voice and who your voice resonates. It may not even resonate with who you think it's resonating with. So I think for all of us, our voice matters. And if your voice matters, there's a reason you want to have impact. There's a reason you went into science. There's a story that needs to be told and heard. And your voice is the only way it's going to be told or heard, whether it's your website, whether it's your presentation, whether it's your report, whether it's your thesis, whether it's your dissertation, whatever that is, your voice is important.
What is your perspective on that framing, soft skills, hard skills, and how do you frame it now?
I frame it in the way that I guess we're taught to frame it. And so obviously, being in science, the technical skills that we perceive to be these hard skills. that are quantifiable, that are objective, that are easy to develop and assess. Traditionally, we still look at those skills and value those skills as extremely important. What I have learned is those other skills are as, if not more important than those hard skills. And so I use the language that people that I need to service understand, but to me, those skills are very important. They are just human skills, they are educational skills, they are professional skills. And so these soft skills, which are often not taught in a formal learning environment, you may have a public speaking class, but we don't talk about the emotional aspects of that often hinders people. What I would say, the hard skill is writing, right? We know we need to learn how to write, or we know we may need to collaborate. But the soft skill is, how do we do that effectively? How do I work with people who are different from me? How do I work with people who have different approaches, who have different personality styles? Am I aware of my personal strengths, of my personality style? Do I have emotional intelligence? Do I even understand what emotional intelligence is? When we say critical thinking, that's a term we throw out in education. What does that look like in the workplace or in an educational setting? So to me, soft skills are applicable to any environment. I use my soft skills as a wife, as a family member. Necessarily use my technical training as a PhD holder because I don't talk the same when I'm with my family than when I'm presenting or in a professional space, but I need to be as some of those soft skills I need to practice constantly or I'm utilizing constantly. Like when I get angry, how do I do that? And how do I manage that anger when I'm stressed, when I'm frustrated? How do I manage those feelings? Those are the soft skills that people assume that we have as we become professional or enter the workplace or get educated, but we may or may not have those.
Is there a story that comes to mind that you could share with us about the difference between these skill sets or the values of them, how valuable they can be? And it's okay to not use any names or
Yeah.
anything like that if you'd like.
There are plenty of studies that show that people leave jobs not necessarily over the job, but over leadership. A person may not make them feel valued. A person may be a quote unquote toxic leader for whatever reasons. They may feel like there's unfairness in the workplace. And so there is this constant request for, okay, we have people who have degrees or are professionals or have technical skills, but they lack people skills. Trying to think, I'll put it in a personal example. Okay, here's a story. So, a story that coincides with this is I told you my quest to figure out this business venture, and I applied for a position. It was a leadership position. And I was, as you know, sometimes you get a degree and they just put you in leadership position. I was so timid and apprehensive. And I'm thinking, okay, I wanted the position, I had the position, but now I have to lead this department. And I was probably the youngest person in the department. So there were people that were 20, 30 years older than me. I was a little nervous going into the first meeting. I was so taken aback by the meeting because in the meeting, everyone just complained. And I've always been the type of person that I'm looking for solutions, and no one seemed to have a solution. That moment gave me the confidence of here are people with way more experience than me, not more education, but the same level of education, but they've been working longer than me, but they're problem focused. It was complaint after complaint after complaint after complaint. And I said, I know why I'm here because I'm the person that's going to help facilitate solutions and how can we address those complaints. So I think that's an example of you have the technical or the hard skills, but as being put into a leadership position, I had to have a different mindset and it was important for me to build relationships.
Just being able to recognize that strength in yourself, that you are solution focused, to not get frustrated with the people at the table complaining, but to be excited about the solutions that you can bring and guiding them to it. I think that is a tremendous soft skill that is very hard to develop. And I think that's one of those things about those labels that are hard for me personally to understand, because it seems like the soft skills are so much harder to develop. They're very much required for the levels of education that we have. but it's almost as though the soft skills are required for the level of success that we're able to attain and to gift to other people. Without those soft skills, I've seen myself implode, put into situations where I had all the technical skills, but I didn't do the work to build those soft skills. And I've seen myself implode in those moments and have to redo the work and actually get called to learning those things. I don't know if that resonates with you, but those soft skills are hard.
They are, and it's so interesting because I feel like people have strengths. For me, some of those hard skills are difficult for me, and the softs, I wouldn't say they come naturally, but there's a certain way that I approach things, and I think that's the importance of collaboration. My husband is very much a hard technical type of person. He's in IT, he's very much into data and numbers. I'm very much, language and relationship building. And seeing that partnership is very important. It's hard for me, just as you said, sometimes to do those other things, which I can learn. A simple thing as an Excel spreadsheet intimidates me. My husband just naturally knows how to put together an Excel spreadsheet and put things together. But something like for him, when we go into a room or a space, and I'm like, couldn't you tell this? And he's completely clueless. And like, how did you pick up on that? But to me, I'm reading the room, I'm engaging with people, I'm paying attention to body language and all these subtleties that is part of that soft skill development.
My husband and I are the inverse of that. I am the technical one. I'm the one who manages all our finances and like does the spreadsheets and plans all of our events and keeps, responds to all the mail. Like I'm the nerd in the relationship and he's very much the warmth and the heart of our family. He can smooth talk anybody. He's so smart in terms of like being aware of what's going on with other people's feelings. He'll often know that I'm feeling something before I
Mhm.
know. And it's incredible to be with someone like that. And so I think it's so cool that you're that. And I also want to highlight, you're so right about the importance of collaboration in it because we all have our natural gifts and we can develop skills where we don't have natural gifts. But it's so much easier to develop those when we have a model, when we have someone we can look up to, a mentor that we can say, Vernetta is really great at reading the room and engaging with people. Let me see how she does that, and that can help elevate my game in that space. In your introduction, you mentioned higher ed. It made itself clear to you that that's not where you're being called. Even to the power of not listening to those around you who are telling you that's the path you should go. Can you give me some insight in the power of not listening? And what did you hear as feedback that you received that higher ed was not for you?
I just knew instinctively, and I don't know, again, if that's part of that soft skill, but also I'm a spiritual person and I pray and I'm very much, you said purpose earlier. So I very much was at a time of my life, I've always been like that. As I pursued a PhD, that was very important for me to, number one, enjoy going to work because I had the experience of not enjoying going to work. I had pursued all these other opportunities and they seemed great and I would get into them and then I would say, "Oh, I don't enjoy this." I had developed the value that if I'm going to spend so much time at work, I want to enjoy it. Like this is one thing I get to choose. There's a lot of things I don't, you don't get to choose the family you're born into, there's a lot of things you don't get to choose. But when it came to my work experience, I knew that I could choose that. And having had those experiences of dreading getting up in the morning and looking forward to Friday every week. I did not want that. And the whole purpose of me becoming more educated was to have more options. As I was in that doctoral program and I felt like this is not, I don't know if I really like this environment. There's things that I like about it, but there's a lot that I don't like about it. And then I was trying to figure out, is it the department I'm in? Is it the university? So I'm trying to go through this checklist of what is it that I don't like? And is this the industry or the field, or is this just this organization or just this unit within the organization? And so as I was going through all of that and started exploring other options and talking to mentors that had given me great advice and were very helpful in helping me navigate that space, and I shared that with them, they're like, "Oh no, you can still do your own thing, just go get tenure first." But then understanding that tenure process to the point, Vanessa, where I felt like I could do that, but I feel like inside I would be dying. Probably make it to tenure, but what would it cost me emotionally, spiritually, mentally? And so that's when I didn't have any models or examples of that at the time. And then I started to process in terms of I just have to be quiet and hear from within and be confident in what I need to do. Because I did try some of the things that they were recommending, and then I didn't like that. And I said, maybe it's a larger research one institution. Maybe go to a small private. And that's the example I told you where I get that position. I'm in a leadership position. It's a small college. It's great. But then I was working 60 hours a week, teaching 4 hours block. And I'm like, okay, I want to have a life outside of work. I want work to be work and I want to enjoy life. And so as I explored some of those opportunities, none of those seemed to fit as well, all within higher education. I finally said, you know what? I just need to leave this environment in a traditional way or how it's being presented to me. And so I'll never forget, Vanessa, I was a part of an organization at the time, a professional organization. There were colleagues that we had been serving together, and we would go to New York. And some of these people 4 years prior, I had told them about it and I was being quiet. But this time I was like confident, like, I know this is what I'm going to do. No one else can dissuade me. I've explored all these other options. I know I'm leaving. And so I shared that with these colleagues I have been working with, and they were very encouraging. And what I realized at that point is a lot of them felt stuck, that they were vested. It's like being vested in a bad relationship. Like the longer you're in it, the harder it is to leave. And so they had obtained tenure. They had these successes on this path. They weren't happy, but they couldn't envision anything else. And so that's when I really felt more affirmed, like, this is the time to explore it because again, I can always come back and pursue that path. I feel like that path will always be there. But if I stay in this path now, I don't know if this opportunity to explore beyond what the path should be or has been will be there. It was really just part of it was exploring the options and still seeing how I felt and was I excited, but I knew I wanted to enjoy the work that I did every day. I knew I wanted to pursue something I was passionate about, and that was the motivation, passionate and purpose.
I'm so glad that we're talking about this. As I look backward on my career, I've had a lot of joy and success in different places in higher ed, and I'm sure neither of us wish any negativity on our colleagues who decide to take this path because we love them for that. That's great. For us, it just wasn't the right calling, and that's okay. I struggled with identifying that within myself because I made myself so busy that it was hard to notice that I was really, really busy at work, and then I just wanted to numb myself while I was at home. I just wanted to watch Netflix and disappear and scroll, and I just felt exhausted. And on Saturday, when I could
Mm,
sleep in, I would oversleep because I felt physically drained from
mm,
trying to toughen my way through not listening to what my body was telling me about whether or not this is the right fit for me. And so taking that negative side and flipping it to what was the positive body feedback that you got when you started to crawl out of these spaces that made you unhappy and finding your purpose and finding your passion? What did that biofeedback look like instead of numbing and sleeping and being kind of listless and sad? What did it look like when you started finding these things?
It was inspiring, it was energizing, it was motivating. Even now, Vanessa, I can tell, as you said, there's a physical reaction. There have been times, and this has just happened in the last few months, where I can think of a particular webinar I had to do a few months ago for a university in the Cayman Island. And that day I was drained. I think I had traveled that week. And I'm like, why did I commit to this night session? It was like a 7:30 session for I'm like, why did I do this to myself? I had every intention of when I started that session, 30 minutes, and then I'll probably just wrap up and let them know, like, really, it's been a week. I've been traveling because it was scheduled for an hour and a half. Literally within 10 minutes of talking, I felt so energized. And it's like I was like the little Energizer bunny rabbit. I went for an hour and a half, and it went by so quickly. And so those are the things that confirm for me, like, this is what you need to be doing. Because even when you're physically tired, mentally tired, there is some type of energy beyond you that kicks
Mm.
in, that gets you excited and motivated, and you're present and you're focused. And what are the questions you want the questions to be asked? The work that I do, it motivates me. Like, I'm motivated to, like, how can I make this understandable? Who is this audience? And, how can I tailor this content? Like, I don't keep the same content. And even I would say the other thing is the people that I started to be surrounded by. There was a different synergy. So again, when I reflect back on my time at teaching, it's like you said, there were people that research and being in the lab and publishing, like, that experience for them was how I felt that night. I wasn't excited like they were excited. I'm like, okay, great for you, love it for you, but I have no motivation to work on that article or publish. But then there were a lot of also colleagues that weren't enjoying that space. But once I went into this space and being in business, most people in business are in business because they're passionate to some level about what they do. And it creates this synergy. Even when you and I have conversations, there's just a different synergy because we're doing the same thing. We speak the same language and we're both enjoying what we're doing. And so I feel like that happens in any space. If you're a teacher and you really enjoy teaching, whether you're in the public school system, at a university, like, when you get around fellow teachers that love teaching, that's a different connection. When you're in the lab or you're researching or you're doing field work and you love doing that and you're around other people that do that, it creates a difference.
For me, what it looked like is that I would wake up earlier than I needed to without an alarm, and just
Mm.
immediately an idea would pop in my head, or something I wanted to learn about would pop in my head, and I would rush to get my coffee, my tea together, to get a clear space and just to dig into it. Because I was so excited to learn more about the psychology behind marketing and how to structure a business model that's both productive and efficient, but also highly ethical and purpose driven. When I found out that there was something called servant leadership, I
Mm,
spent
yes.
probably a good year just digging and digging into that, being like, wow, this is so energizing. So, just for anyone who's listening, follow that energy because your vibe attracts your tribe. And if you're all miserable, then what are you doing there?
You know what I liken it to? I think we complicate things sometimes so much when it comes to our professional lives or our educational aspirations because there seems to be so much at stake. If I make the wrong
Yes.
decision, if I don't get into the right career, like, even for me as a first generation person, a lot of things where I don't have other financial options. When I make a decision, it needs to be the right decision because I can't financially go back home and stay with mom and dad. And so there's so much at stake that we complicate it when it's very simple. It's like, I'm sure we've all had that experience of not wanting to pick up the phone for certain people. And then there's people that every time they call, we're like, hey girl, what's going on? That should be how we are with work. Like, if every time you think about going to work, it's, oh my God. Well, why are you putting yourself through that for money? And this is what I truly believe. When you are doing things that you're passionate about, like you said, the motivation, you're up to 5:30, you're reading, you're researching, the money is going to come. And often when you're not doing, because here's what you're doing, this is what I realize. And this is now, even as a business owner, I only want to do business. I only want people doing business for me on a personal level or business wise, that they're passionate about what they do. If you're in something for money, and you're not excited about it, are you really going to put forth the effort? And then if you're competing with people who are excited about what they're doing, that's going to leave you.
Worse than the money, even, just add a spiritual, physical, emotional loss, because these things all affect each other. None of this happens alone. The more in tune that you get with yourself, and when you know yourself really well, you can start to feel yourself sliding into that kind of like dark pit.
Yes.
When you're feeling that, the more attuned you get with it, the more you're like, we got to change something right now. I'm
Right.
not going back there. We're going to go this way instead. We're going to go to where there's light and energy and vibrance and joy and purpose. So you started your company in 2011. And so this is Vernetta's company and her homepage. And I would love to learn from you, Vernetta, since starting your company in 2011, There have likely been these huge aha moments or like awakening in your journey as an entrepreneur. Share one of those that comes to mind.
The first one that comes to mind is having to make a decision about who I was going to service. I started the company in 2011, but I was still working at the university. I went full time in 2015. I was doing a little bit of everything because when you're a writer, people just ask you, oh, can you edit this? I was editing grants, I was editing books, books that people wanted to write commercially, academic, like a little bit of everything. But I have this friend who she loves media. She constantly listens to Sirius XM, and she texted me one day and she said, "Hey, Vernetta, I recommended you to be on this show, the Maggie Linton show." And she coordinated the whole thing. So I get this 30-minute with this woman who has a show. And at the time, again, I was doing a little bit of everything. So I had the academic focus and the non academic focus. And every time she asked me a question, Vanessa, I had to think about, do I want to answer this from an academic perspective or should I answer this from somebody who's trying to write a book? As soon as I finished that show, I was so conflicted and torn. And again, paying attention to me and how I'm feeling. And I'm like, I didn't do either side justice. Vernetta, you have to focus. You have to decide what is it you are going to do with this business. The first thing I tell people when they're working on the written documents is everything's audience driven. Like, know who your audience is, and you have to speak to your audiences. But guess what? I wasn't doing. I was trying to speak to multiple audiences. I wasn't effectively speaking to any of them. And so I made the decision from that day. I'm getting rid of the non academic and I'm focusing on the academic side. It's interesting. I still do I've helped over 30 people write books, autobiographies, and other types of books. But I don't promote. If it happens to come up, I say I do that by referral only. Or if I feel, and so since I made that decision, it gave me a focus. It was scary at first because then I'm thinking I'm cutting off a monetary source.
Right.
But the focus, I could speak to your language, my tribe. Who is Vernetta for? Who does this company service? That was a learning moment.
That focus is so essential because when you have a clear directive with what you do, you don't think about staying focused because it's easy. It's built into your job. Like, I am a professor of chemistry and I research this specific niche, and I have 3 graduate students who need to publish roughly once per year to defend. And so everything just lines up, which is a beautiful part of being in higher ed, is that the metrics and measures sometimes are very clear. But when you're a business owner, you're given the reins and gone, like, go anywhere, do anything. And the trouble with that is that you want to go everywhere and do everything, and it becomes your undoing. You have to be like, okay, I need the self control, the focus, and the crystal clear focus on where I want to go, even the vision, and to be able to say not just who you're serving, but what specific service you're offering. It's so much harder than I ever thought it would be. And I keep thinking I'll hear signals and get ideas of like, what if we could do this? What if we could do that? And I have to be like, no. It's like the lady in the red dress in the Matrix. I need you to stay over there. It's like, stay focused on the objective of freedom.
I think also that has to do with, again, back to personality style and knowing yourself. Because when I reflect back to even my doctoral journey, I thought I went in with a clear research agenda, but I literally was like a rabbit chasing the carrot. And I was like all over the place. And it brought in anthropology, it brought in psychology, it brought in history. I just had to keep my footing in English. And so you're so right when I feel like there's a certain type to excel in business, and it typically is people that are open and vision, because I had colleagues who were very definitive coming into their programs, and whatever their research agenda was from semester one, they stuck to it. But I think there's people that don't. So even some of the people I service a lot in academia, they still are very entrepreneurial in a sense. And so they have these ideas, even with the directive. Often it's the issue of what's urgent versus what's important. I think everybody struggles with that. Like, this is urgent because the deadline is here, but is this an important priority? And so when you think about, for example, a faculty member who has their research, who has their teaching, who has their service, they're constantly making decisions about what's important, but often the urgent is constantly what they're having to deal with. And that those important things, oh, I need to be working on my own research. I need to be publishing. I need to be writing. I have children. I have all those things that are urgent.
And it's nice that we can tie it into careers for everybody. It's not just entrepreneurs that struggle with
Mhm.
discerning urgence, importance, and focus. How did you get to know me and Science with Impact?
I was looking for some referrals for some amazing scientists, and I reached out to a gentleman at the University of South Florida by the name of Bernard Batson, and he sent me your information. And so I emailed you and we met, and he was like, "Oh, she's a wonderful USF alum. She has her own, she's doing some amazing things in science." Yes, go Bulls. You just never know what amazing people are out there doing amazing things. And until you ask, until you contact your network, or I never would have met you. I'm so glad that we've met because knowing you and the work that you do has enriched my life. And I have a great person that, again, partnership or collaboration can help them with statistics. I help them with their writing. I help them with their dissertations. I get questions about statistics all the time. I also like to be a great referral source. And so now I know, hey, if this faculty member, this colleague, if this grad student needs it, this organization, if I'm out here, because people look for experts when they know experts. And so to be able to have someone that I know and trust and is of high ethics, and it's just a blessing to be able to have known you and to have come to know you so well. That's how we met, through me looking for some statisticians.
I wanted to ask you, when a scientist says, "I've lost my voice in the jargon, the technical writing has consumed my identity, and I'm no longer coming through in my work," what are the first sort of two or three moves that you helped them do to find their authentic voice again?
I think the first thing I ask them is to go back to, who do you want to speak to and what is your purpose? For me, always going back to audience and purpose is critical to reclaiming voice, because often maybe they're in a genre space that it's for their first time, because you have to speak to different audiences at times. And so if you're speaking to a new or different audience for the first time, you may lose your voice because you're not used to speaking to that audience. Let's say you have a practitioner community voice, and now you're submitting something to a conference or somewhere else, then you're going to need to use a lot of that jargon. So it may be appropriate for that particular document to have lost your voice a little bit, if that makes sense. But if
Yeah.
you're speaking to who you usually speak to and you felt you've lost your voice, now that's a completely different thing. Often I find when people lose their voice, it's because they're doing something new. They're in a different venue, or they're doing a topic they haven't done before. So they're relying a lot on the scholarship until they get comfortable enough and familiar enough and knowledgeable enough with it that then their voice will resurface. The other thing that I would also ask is, what is the voice that you have? Because I don't think people are clear sometimes about their voice. If you were to describe your voice, what is that voice? Or who is your voice for? Because our voice is our voice. Just like we talked about, you having that soothing, calm, that's your voice. Now, when you write, the disadvantage of when we write, we don't have tone, we don't have inflection, we don't have hand gestures and movements. And so we don't have all that. All we have are a person's pure words. And so often it does take more effort to make your voice come through. But here's the reality: one has a distinct writing style, just like everyone has a distinct speaking style. You could write short, choppy sentences. You could write a lot of intro clauses. You can be a person who's comma happy. You can be a person who doesn't use commas at all. I often hear, "Oh, I always write a comma where I think one goes or where there's a pause." No, there's actually rules for how we use a comma. And it's not just when you pause. Your voice is already there. It's helping people be clear about what that voice is. So I would often turn it back on the person and ask a series of questions. Who is your audience? What is your purpose for this? Are you doing this for the first time? And then what stage are you in this writing process? From a disciplinary perspective, we're very huge on process. We don't produce the first thing, or we don't submit the first thing that we produce. Like, we are trained, like we go through the revision process. We know there are going to be multiple iterations of this document. And when people aren't accustomed to that, and they submit a very early version, it's going to have a lot of the discipline in there. And so you understanding where they are in that process is important as well, like how much revision has been done. Those are some of the things that I would do. I would gather more information to try to understand where they are because it may be appropriate for them to not have their voice as strong as it needs to be.
Vernetta, tell me about your voice. What is your voice in writing and speaking?
My voice is a voice of application. My voice is a voice of encouragement and authenticity. So when I think about my voice, I do things very strategically. For example, even when I started the company, I go by Dr. V, and that was very strategic because I wanted to be recognized for my expertise, especially when I'm in academic spaces, because it is a space that you need to understand credentials. But I also wanted to be accessible. I didn't want to be Dr. Mosley. I don't want, when I'm working with faculty or working with graduate students, and I started primarily with graduate students, I didn't want them to look at me as their professor. That is sometimes untouchable, sometimes there. Like, I'm here with you. I have the credentials, but I'm here for you to be vulnerable, for you to ask the questions that you don't ask, or you think you're going to be looked at a certain way because you don't know. And so I work to have that voice. Every time I present, I start with my story and I start with my struggles because I'm never going to remove myself from those struggles because that's very important to me not to think like I've arrived and it wasn't a process to get here. Like, I haven't arrived, I have the credentials, but I'm still learning. I'm still growing. I'm still a human being. I still have weaknesses. I just have a certain level of expertise when it comes to writing, language, communication that you may have, but everybody in this room comes in with expertise. So I like to come from a strengths based model. Everything that I do, let's start with your strengths. Like, you have come this far, you know how to write, you know how to communicate, you know how to present, or you wouldn't be here. So that is my voice, is always to build bridges, to build relationships from a expert opinion, to take my high level knowledge. I'm not here to speak to other PhDs in English. I'm not trying to speak to, so I don't use a lot of jargon. And if I use the jargon, it's because I want them to be able to find resources so that you have to understand the jargon. If you want to improve grammar or improve certain things, I need to give you this language so you can find information. So that's my voice. I'm professional, expert driven, applicable. You need to be able to leave here using it. And you need to feel confident that you can do it and that you're equipped to do it because you can.
When I close my eyes and I hear your voice, I picture this bridge, this big, beautiful bridge that has all this like wisdom and courage and vision and clarity of getting from here to there. So I don't know if that serves you, but that's what I picture.
I think I even shared with you. So the name of the company, Cultivate the Writer, is doing business as. The true name of the company is Chrysalis Consulting. So the chrysalis is actually the cocoon that protects the caterpillar as it's transforming into the butterfly. So the reason I named the company Chrysalis was because I wanted to be this safe, protective space that people can come as they're transforming into whatever it is that they're doing before they release it to the world, because scholarship is scary, writing is scary, presenting is scary. And so you're putting yourself before the public. And so, in order to grow, to be able to do that confidently, Chrysalis Consulting was all about being a safe place to grow and to develop the skills that you need to then be released into the world.
With AI drafting tools everywhere, how can scientists use AI for good? How can we use AI in good places? And what are some examples of places we shouldn't use AI?
In general, especially for people who are dealing with intellectual property, if you are a scientist and this is your intellectual property, we talked about hard skills versus soft skills, that's intangible. Your thinking, your ideas, and very cautious when I talk to people who are dealing in intellectual property about using AI. Because again, you're just feeding the database and you're giving it your ideas, your thoughts. There are plenty of court cases now. I follow it from a legal perspective. I sit on this textbook and academic authors AI committee, and there's a lawyer there. And so now we're seeing all these court cases where a lot of these large language model companies are being sued because this was copywritten information that you fed these databases and you didn't get permission. Now they're saying, hey, if you're an academic author, put your go add your name to the class action lawsuit and see if your work was used here, because now these companies are going to have to start to pay for taking copywritten information without getting permission to use it. And as of now, I think the laws are going to change, and but I follow it from a legal perspective because of this issue of copyright. But as of now, the law states that only something that is human generated can be copywritten. And that came from a case where I think there was a monkey that took a picture, like a selfie, and somebody tried to copyright, and they're like, no, copyright only applies to human produced work. Again, the technology is evolving much more quickly, so I'm interested to see what that backlash will be. So my goal is to always to educate. If this is information that you want to protect, obviously you can't control whether other people put your information into AI, but use it in a way that you can protect your intellectual property, especially with, with science. If you're going to use it, change something so that even if you can use it, don't use your exact thing. So put something that's a comparable or a metaphor or something. But in terms of the writing in and of itself, I think it can be useful in a lot of ways. Obviously, brainstorming and fleshing through thoughts and ideas in the work that doesn't require your thinking, I would say. That's the value that you have, is your thinking that may help you flesh through your thoughts or try to organize your thoughts, but you're the thinker. Your brain, that's the human element. I tell people the unique thing that you have is your thinking. Even when it comes to writing, one of my favorite quotes is writing, your writing is just a picture of your thoughts. That's all. Writing is a reflection of good thinking often. Confused writing is a reflection of confused thinking. I often say when it comes, especially research-based and scientific writing, people write too soon because when you're not clear, and let's say you're doing all this research or gathering all this information, and speaking back to how can you lose your voice, you might have started writing too soon because you haven't thought through what you want to say with all this data and information that you've gathered, and you just start to write because there's a deadline or you feel you need to start writing, and your voice isn't there because you haven't thought through what you want to say or what the relationship is between all of this information. And that's different for different people. And it may be different for different projects. I'm very clear about what I want to say. So I don't use AI a lot to write. I'm very clear about how, because I've developed strategies over the years of how to organize my thoughts. So I don't need AI to help me organize my thoughts. But that's not to say somebody else doesn't. The only type of writing I use AI for is for my social media writing because I just want it to save me time. Any serious writing that reflects my voice, my brand, who I am, I'm very comfortable and confident producing all of that writing. But I understand for people who don't have the training, don't have 3 degrees, don't have a master's and PhD, those are the people that I talk to about, okay, now how can you use it depending on the type of writing that you're doing? You can use it unilaterally, hey, for your emails. And if it's not information you want to protect or you're not concerned about or it's not proprietary, you don't have to worry about having your own private version, the tools. But for people who are doing scientific writing, I would say number one, look at your institution. If you're affiliated with an organization or institution, university or organization, always adhere to their guidelines. And then number two, you can use it to brainstorm. You can use it to create outlines, or outlines are one way. There's many ways to organize information depending on, you might be a visual person and outlines may not work for you. You may need the bubbles. You may be an auditory learner, and in conversation, that's how your thoughts get clarified. Maybe you need to have a conversation with it, like, hey, I'm thinking about this. And even in that conversation and going back and forth, your thoughts are getting clarified. Maybe you wanted to draft a certain section of, I'm seeing more and more, Vanessa, of just statements of, as long as you acknowledge it, of statements and full dissertations of statements of AI use, that I used it in these ways to collect the data, to help synthesize my literature, to help draft certain portions, to clean up. And so people are using it all kinds of ways. I think people have to determine their comfort level and just understand the ethical aspects of it and the legal aspects of it.
One gift that I was given while I was earning my PhD by my advisor, Dr. Scott Lewis, I was very much taught to separate writing for discovery from writing for dissemination, because they serve different purposes. Writing for discovery is basically you're writing, what do you think of these findings? And what's novel about it to you? And based on what you've read, what do you think would be valuable as a contribution to society and to academia? And in that space, not having, back then AI wasn't a thing, but not having even Grammarly, because that was a thing that was based on AI back then that was available. I wouldn't even allow Grammarly to go in and proofread what I was writing in that space because it wasn't meant for that. It's just for my eyes. And it was basically my lab log. Like, why did I make this decision in the methodology? Why did I think this methodology would be stronger than that methodology? Those sorts of thought processes are all documented so that when I go to write for dissemination, I can try and have more clarity.
That's what I love about writing. There are things that are general writing conventions, but you have to know the conventions and the language of your discipline. And to me, you just were able to take a general concept about writing, you were able to make it applicable for the discipline of science, for the field of science. Think of it this way versus dissemination.
I have the honor of introducing you to Anissa. This is Anissa. I had the pleasure of interviewing her on the last podcast recording, and she had the opportunity to ask you a question, knowing you would be our next guest. Anissa is in bioinformatics, and she founded Impact Bio. So, this is her leading a workshop looking at different cutoffs of DNA to help people look for particular markers that are useful in their work. And Anissa's question to you is as follows. Here we go.
I'm curious to know how she curates her learning material in a way that is receptive for diverse audiences. I would be very curious to know how she presents her material in a way that's receptive to scientists, to engineers, to administrative folks, like that sort of thing.
I research every audience and I try to talk to people in the discipline. So, for example, sometimes there's mixed audiences, but I do as much as my research as possible on the audience to be able to say, okay, if I'm going into a room of engineers or the person that invites me to do that particular session, I'll ask them, can you give me some documents? What are some of your style conventions? So I try to get as much data and information about conventions to that particular genre as possible. Or I'll ask for examples. Is there something they want us to work on? Can you provide some examples of those so I can review beforehand? Because what I have found in the work that I do, showing examples is the best way to help people grasp the concepts because typically only have an hour and a half. If my goal is to make sure that you understand a concept or principle or strategy and you're able to leave it applying it, then I accomplish that one of two ways. Either give me some examples that I can show before and after or work through during the session, or have them bring some works that they're working on and do that. So that's what I do in terms of audiences. Whatever audience it is, I have to educate myself first to understand how it may deviate or how it may apply to them. And then I incorporate those examples. I'll change the examples to make sure I'm using examples for that audience. Now, if it's a varied audience, which is often the case as well, like I was telling you, I have to go to university. They have something at University of Florida. It's called Grad Gators. I do a dissertation boot camp for them, and we do a big session where it may be 200 plus students across all disciplines, doctoral level and master's level. Then I'll pick a topic that I know can apply to everyone, like revision or the lit review or personalizing the writing process so that they can take a concept and have some type of structure and be able to apply it in whatever manner that works for them.
The examples sound like they're really, really key to this. I can think of some disciplines of chemistry, even that, like organic synthesis, their articles are, on average, I would say, from the ones that I've read, are about 3 pages long. And they basically cite previous synthetic pathways, what they did different and why. And then it's like out they go, right? And not to say that it's easy, but that's different. But in chemistry education, where we have to really couch our understandings of society through frameworks and articulate this is the framework that we use, this is the methodology, this is the principles that connect these two, and the measures that then can be used to estimate these sort of nebulous latent variables. Our writing tends to be like 25 to 40 pages for an article. So it's so interesting to think about. Vernetta, your voice is important. And I'm just so honored that we got to engage with each other in this space, because I've been wanting to just sit down and have an hour and a half conversation with you anyway.
I enjoyed it, and hopefully, we got to I feel like, did we even talk about certain things? But I think hopefully for the goal of your podcast and what you want your listeners to take from it, it'll bring value to them.
Well, God bless you. And thank you so much for making this time today.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me, and God bless you as well.